have enjoyed the movie. It's a very theatrical movie. And I don't know if you had ever seen images of people like that, you know, and if you knew that in Brazil we had bandits such as the Cangaceiros, you know. So what I'm going to do right now, I mean, for the people who have stayed here, I think the majority, hopefully, is to show a few pictures of the real guys, of the real Cangaceiros, and most of them were in the movie, and explain what these pictures are about, and hopefully we can do it in a very brief way, like 10 minutes or perhaps even less than that. Well, this picture here is Lampião. He's the bandit king. If you want to buy a biography on Lampião, there is an American Brazilianist called Billy James Chandler who wrote a book called Lampião the Bandit King, I believe in English, that's the title. And in which, you know, he tells the whole story of this man. And I'm not going to be able to do it right now because it would take a long time. But he was actually the most important of them all. If in the 19th century you had Jesuíno Brilhante as the most important one, and in the 20th century, early 20th century, you had a man named Antônio Silvino, who was known as the king of the Cangaceiros, the bandit king, and the governor of the sertão, of the hinterland, before him, and he was arrested in 1914. After that, this man became historically the most important bandit in Brazilian history, as we know until today. This picture was taken in 1926 by Lauro Cabral de Oliveira in Juazeiro, Ceará. And he's dressed, as you can see, in the uniform of the batalhões patrióticos, the patriotic battalions, you know, that were created to fight. You know, they were raised in this region to fight the Prestes column, the Coluna Prestes. This group of men that were led by Luiz Carlos Prestes would later, many years later, become the head of the Brazilian Communist Party. But at that time, Prestes was fighting the Arthur Bernardo's government. And Lampião was supposedly going to fight him, and he didn't at the end, but as you saw in the movie. They say there were some skirmishes and small fights, but as a matter of fact, they didn't get to have battles. You know. This is a picture of Lampião in his famous cangaceiro outfit. You know, you can see he's dressed in a different way that he was dressed in the previous picture. And this picture was taken by a physician and military officer, Eronildes de Carvalho, who would later become governor of the state of Sergipe. He was the son of the Coronel Antônio Carvalho, a large landowner, at the Jaramataia Ranch, Sergipe, on November 27, 1929. And you can see that he was wearing military boots given by the Eronildes himself. And this was the first picture of Lampião to be published in the newspaper Diário de Pernambuco in June 1935, many years later. And the irony of this picture is that this picture illustrates an article on that particular newspaper. And the article was discussing the struggle of the governors of Pernambuco and Alagoas against those bandits. But the picture was taken by a man that would become the governor of Sergipe in his own farm. And he would receive, give Lampião and his men all the comforts of his farm. He would give him Dutch cheese and Scotch whiskey and all the good things of life that he really enjoyed. Probably he would really enjoy being here tonight after this talk with you, because Lampião liked the good things in life, you know. Even though in the movie you see them looking like real rustic men, but in fact, I mean, they wouldn't bathe a lot, you know. It wasn't very common. They would spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks without having any kind of shower or bath or whatever. But they loved French perfumes. So you could smell a cangaceiro for miles, and they would throw even French perfumes in their horses. So, I mean, they loved what was the best that they could get. You know? And on the one hand, they were very, we can say, archaic in many aspects, in religious aspects, for instance. And in many of the medicines and the things that they used on their daily basis. But on the other hand, if they could, they would have the best cigarettes, cigars, brandies, whiskeys, and food. I mean, everything that they could put their hands on, they would have it. You know? Well, this is a picture of Lampião and Maria Bonita, his partner. You know, the queen of the Cangaceiros. The most famous cangaceiro couple, picture taken by Benjamin Abraham, that Arab that you saw in the movie, in 1936. You see the way her hair is cut, you know, the hairstyle. This was very uncommon in that region at that time. So you can imagine, they would get magazines and newspapers from the capitals, and they would see Hollywood stars in those magazines. So in the middle of this region that you saw, very arid, hot, dry region, far away from the capitals, from the sea, from the coast, they would get, he's reading a magazine there, and her haircut is like Hollywood actresses, because they wanted to be fashionable. So when women entered the cangaço at that time, you know, they had a whole, a very interesting role in portraying themselves, and so they had singer machines. Do you call it singer machines?
Sorry.
The brand Singer.
Yeah.
So they loved the Singer brand, because before that they had the sewing machine called Progresso, but the Singer machine was the most modern one that they could acquire. And so they would do all their outfits were designed by themselves, you know, and they would sew them with the Singer machines, because it was a modern thing to do. And they would try to, you know, emulate, in a way, you know, the way the people in Rio de Janeiro, for instance, were having their haircuts, their hairstyle, and she would do that. Although Lampião himself and many cangaceiros didn't have this shortcut hair in women. Lampião had one of his men was called José Baiano, that you saw, killing his wife there. He had those iron brands that they brand cattle with his initials, JB. So he would brand women like that, especially the ones that had short haircut, and they would think women shouldn't be so modern in that sense, you know. But in this picture, you know, he tries to show an image of a serious and civilized man, you know, with a paper and a dog. And you're going to see other cangaceiros, for instance, Corisco, in a different way, you know, portraying themselves in a different manner. This picture is the Arab Benjamin Abraham, the man who was there to film them and who did all those footages, shaking hands with Lampião. So you have the cangaceiros Vila Nova and a non-cangaceiro, Luiz Pedro, like a very important right-hand man to Lampião. Benjamin Abraham, this man over here, on the left. Amoroso, Lampião, Cacheado, Maria Bonita, another unknown cangaceiro, and Quinta-feira. And this picture was probably taken by the cangaceiro Juriti. This is also 1936 when Benjamin Abraham was there. This is the Corisco, the real Corisco. The blonde devil, on a picture taken by Benjamin Abraham in a soldier's posture, you know. And you can see that it's always posed as a soldier, as a military man, because he was formerly a soldier. He was a military man, he was in the barracks, and he defected from the military. So all his pictures are like in a military manner, differently from Lampião. Lampião would try to show himself many times as either an intellectual or a religious person, or even as a coronel, one of those important political figures of the time. So there are pictures of Lampião praying, for instance, pictures of him reading books and newspapers, and some newspapers even claimed, and this is probably a very absurd thing, but even claimed he loved to read Edgar Wallace and Georges Simenon. And obviously, I mean, that's probably not accurate. And poses in a very relaxed manner with his wife, wife, quote-unquote wife. I mean, they were not married officially, but they were partners. So it's an interesting photo of Corisco taken at that time. Another picture of Corisco taken by Benjamin Abraão, same style of posture. This is Corisco and the real Dadá, his wife. And by the way, this couple was legally married, and even married in they had a religious ceremony. So even though many Cangaceiros had partners, had wives, quote-unquote wives, they were not officially married, legally married, not even in the church. They lived together with these women. And when one woman was killed or had their, in the case of the one that you saw, I mean, the cangaceiro would have pick up another woman and he would bring to the cangaço. Or in the case that the woman lost his husband, during a battle, for instance, either she would need to have another partner right away, or she would be expelled from the group, because they didn't allow single women in the groups, only couples, women that had a quote-unquote husband. Same picture taken at that time. Corisco and his group posing, for the Corisco and Roxinho, another cangaceiro. There's the Cangaceiro Canario, all from the same groups, and they had groups and subgroups. So sometimes you would see in the movie, for instance, Corisco had this small group of men that were under his command. But what Lampião did, the bandit king did, was that he had what we could say, quote-unquote, a confederation of Cangaceiros. So if there was a large group and a subgroups. So if, for instance, Lampião decided to invade a larger city, which would require a larger amount of men, they would call these different groups that were in that region. They would get together under his command, because he was the most important one, and would attack that city. But afterwards, these groups would perhaps split, and they had different leaders of this group. And the main leaders, obviously, they would call themselves leaders of the great Cangaceiros. Then they saw themselves as different from the rest, from the rank and file, the less important ones. This is Zé Sereno's group, for instance. This is another group that was linked to Lampião. So from left to right, you have an unknown Cangaceiro, Quina, Cravo Roxo, Zé Sereno, Canário, Manuel Moreno, and another unknown Cangaceiro from 1936. And you have to remember, cangaço is about to end. It's late 1930s, 1936. In 1938, Lampião would be killed and beheaded. So it's, let's say, the end of that. Again, Zé Sereno and his group, I could say the names of the Cangaceiros, but it wouldn't be that important. But anyway, you can see, and the only one, Adilha, the partner of Zé Sereno, smiling there, very happy. And the other one, because it was a novelty, it's for them, some of these people had never seen photographic, a camera in their lives. So this is a group of volantes. Volantes were the statical mobile police commanders. Yeah, as you saw in the movie Zé Rufino, this group of policemen that would hunt, let's say, quote unquote, hunt the Cangaceiros. This one is from a group from Bahia. You see that, in a way, some of them are starting to dress alike. You had different uniforms from the police. And the police in the beginning, as you saw in the movie, most of the police had a certain type of uniform. But after a certain point, for instance, the police of Pernambuco, who would send policemen, police groups from the capital, from Recife, to the countryside to fight this Cangaceiros, and would always lose the battle, because they were not from the region. They were not as strong, as resistant, and as prepared as the Cangaceiros were to fight in that very far away, very distant part of the states. So what they did was, after a while, first of all, police started to recruit people from the region. And they started to change their uniforms, and the uniforms of the police started to look alike the Cangaceiros uniforms. So you have sometimes groups of policemen that look exactly like Cangaceiros, with the same uniform. And the people that started to fight them, that were recruited in that region from the hinterland, then started to be more effective. And even Lampião would say that he missed very much the soldiers from the coast, because after these people started to fight them, it started to change, you know. This is a group of volantes from the state of Alagoas, commanded by Lieutenant João Bezerra. And over there, right in the middle, to the left, you have three heads over there. The heads of Cangaceiros Serra Branca, Eleonora, and Ameaça. This picture was taken in February 1938. You see, the uniforms of these men look like Cangaceiros uniforms, but they are all police. All these people are policemen. And over there, the three heads. These are the same heads of the same people shown in the picture just before this one. So the heads, the weapons, and the personal objects of this Cangaceiro Serra Branca, his partner Eleonora, and Ameaça. February 1938, being displayed to the public. This one is a picture of the body of Cangaceiro Manuel Vitor, also another known man, and being displayed by soldiers under the command of Lieutenant Arlindo Rocha. And this is in front of the prison of Taracatu, Pernambuco, 1937. We have to remember also that police for a long time had a lot of difficulties to fight the Cangaceiros. I mean, they didn't have enough men in the countryside. And that it's a vast region. It's a very large area of the hinterland of that region. Some cities didn't have even jails or even police headquarters. Sometimes they had to rent a house of a civilian to use as an office for the policemen. Sometimes they had to recruit a farmer to do a part-time job as someone that would take care of the police headquarters, because I mean they didn't have money. The soldiers' paychecks were very low. It was very common, for instance, when they were in battle. After the battle, many of the soldiers from the police would run to the bodies and dispute, fight over the bodies of the Cangaceiros, because they would try to get all the money they could from them, because their paycheck was so low. The Cangaceiros were much richer than the policemen. One day Lampião said, asked a major of Tatugueiros that also wrote a book about him many years later. He said, "How much do you earn a month?" He said, "Oh, I earn, my salary is that much." He said, "Oh, I better stay in my job, in my profession as a cangaceiro, because you don't earn enough. It's a bad job." And so they would run and fight for the bodies. And as you saw in the movie, they had a lot of rings. So if they couldn't get the rings out of the hands, they would chop off their hands, put in their pockets, and then when they went home, they would take off the rings. So they would get that as an additional extra payment, let's say. So it would be very profitable for them to run after the bodies of the Cangaceiros. And many times they also would get promotions after the battles, depending if they killed, I don't know, I mean, important Cangaceiros. This is a picture of Cangaceiro Barreira, and he's posing on the side of the head of another Cangaceiro from his group, Atividade. This guy that his former comrade in arms, the guy that he just beheaded, was the official castrator of Corisco's group. So he was the one that would castrate people. And this guy was killed and beheaded on June 5th, 1938. So it was at the end of the cangaço, in the region of Caboclo, Pão de Açúcar, Alagoas. And this was proved to the police and to the authorities that he really did mean to collaborate with the police. He wanted to leave cangaço, he wanted to become a civilian, let's say, quote unquote. He wanted to get out of that criminal life. And a way to prove that was to bring the head of this man, and so he would show them that he meant what he was saying. And so he brought the head of his comrade in arms. This is the head of Cangaceiro Zeppelin, killed by Lieutenant Zé Rufino, the man that killed Corisco. In Porto da Folha, Sergipe, and it was displayed in Alagoas in 1937. Also, you can see the picture with all the objects. These are the heads of Mariano, Palvelli, and Pavão. They were killed by also the Volante, these police groups led by Zé Rufino on October 25th, 1936 in Gararu, Sergipe. This pictures of the group of Lampião and his group after their murder in Nanjico, July 28, 1938. So you can see it looks, there's a famous cover of a record, an LP of Secos e Molhados. It's a Brazilian pop music band, 1970s, I believe, that looked like that too. And they look very alive, some of those, like they were sleeping or something. This is the most famous picture of beheaded Cangaceiros, the group of Lampião. And as I said, they were displayed, sent to different places, and at the end they went to the Instituto Nina Rodrigues in Salvador and were displayed to the general public and studied. People would measure their heads to see if they had some criminal traits that, according to the measurements, could prove that they were bandits because they were born bandits, like Lombrosian theories. And at that time, many people still believed in that. So they were studied for many years and then displayed. This is Cangaceiro Villanova after he surrendered in the police headquarters in Maceió, Alagoas, in 1939. So what happened is that after Lampião was killed, and in the movie you have that narrator saying that after Lampião was killed, Corisco and Dadá roamed through the hinterland for the next 4 years, but in fact it's not accurate because they roamed for the next 2 years, because after that, right after Lampião was killed, many Cangaceiros turned themselves in. When they started to surrender to police forces, many of them. So this is one, but they never lose their dignity. You see, they're being watched by policemen who are posing behind them, but they are still in their Cangaceiros pose. And the last picture we have here, and I had more, but I just chose this one to show you because of the time, and we're running short of time right now. You have Cangaceiro Pancada, also after he surrendered in the police headquarters in Massaiola, it was 1939 too. Also representing what many of these men were doing at the time. So at the time Corisco was killed, in fact, most of the Cangaceiros had already surrendered. I mean, cangaço was really over. If you would pick a date that would represent really the end of cangaço, would be the murder of Lampião, the bandit king. But Corisco became perhaps as an important, iconic figure as other Cangaceiros, or not as Lampião, but compared to lesser known Cangaceiros, in many aspects because of the movie directed by Glauber Rocha. This movie, you have to remember that in from the late 50s to the late 60s, and especially during the military regime, the military dictatorship, Cangaceiros were seen as rebels, as the men who would fight the police, the government, the authorities. So, in a way, that's one of the ideas that people had about them, which is, it's fair to say, it's very unprecise and very wrong, But the Cangaceiros were manipulated. Their image was manipulated in such a way that you have Cangaceiros for every taste. Depending on the time the books and the movies were made, and written or filmed. So there are books by people who fought the Cangaceiros, and books written since the early 20th century, 1920s, 1930s, in which the Cangaceiros are depicted as the most abominable and cruel and vicious and horrible monsters. Later, some people would write books about Lampião, for instance. There is a man that wrote a 6-volume book on Lampião, praising him, as trying to depict Lampião as this great, good man, especially after he met Maria Bonita. And then he became a nice man that would give money to the poor. It would be like a Brazilian Robin Hood. Obviously, that's not accurate either. In the 1930s, the Brazilian Communist Party, and even the Comintern, people in Moscow, or Moscow, as you say here, would have discussions, the Comintern, the Communist International, delegates in Moscow, and with the Brazilian Communist Party officials, would discuss how to co-opt Cangaceiros to the revolutionary fight in Brazil. Obviously, that never happened. And the Brazilian delegates that would go to Moscow would depict the Cangaceiros in a certain manner, and would say that there were 1,000 brigands that were preparing themselves to join the struggle against the landowners, the large landowners. Obviously, that was very inaccurate, and the proof is that that never happened. As I said, especially in the 1960s, many Cangaceiros were depicted as the prototype of this rebellious man that would fight the authorities. But then, as I was talking before the movie to some friends, the Cangaceiros were used the image of the cangaceiro became part of the Brazilian folklore. So cangaceiros left the real life to become myths themselves. So we have stories of cangaceiros fighting police, fighting coronéis, fighting authorities. But on the other hand, you have Lampião fighting the devil, fighting dragons with several heads, fighting beings from the Brazilian folklore. So they themselves become folklore figures, you know. And dozens and dozens of movies were made about the cangaceiros, from pornographic movies with cangaceiros to comedies with cangaceiros, with more political-driven movies that would depict them as this possible choice of fighting against authority, to other movies that were more accurate historically. So, I mean, you have cangaceiros for all kinds of people and all kinds of tastes. And, well, I don't know if I can, if you would like to ask any questions, or, I mean, I didn't write a biography of Corisco. So I wrote, my book is trying to show, the book that just came out in Brazil a month and a half, 2 months ago, tries to give a broad picture of the phenomenon since its beginning to its end, and obviously some specificities of this phenomenon. But I chose this movie specifically because I think it could give you, a good portrait of the sertão, of their outfits, of the way the cangaceiros live together, with the relationship with women, with the police. You see, for instance, they were talking about in the 1920s, women in the groups, but in fact, the first woman to go into this cangaceiros group was Maria Bonita, Lampião's woman, or wife. Not official wife, but his partner. And after she entered into the cangaço, he let other cangaceiros bring women to fight with them too. But you can imagine, this is 1930. Cangaço would last until 1938, so the last years of the cangaço. So women, in fact, even though the cangaço, the image that we have of cangaço, that started in the 19th century, but really was very iconic and emblematic with Lampião, especially with Lampião. The best image we have of the cangaceiros are of the 1930s, when cangaço was declining. Because then you had women, and they designed their own outfits. You can see that the outfits, their uniforms were different from the men's uniforms. But they also had all very similar uniforms that they designed. And Dadá was a very good, very good in doing those designs and putting all these stars and some medieval symbols, some religious symbols on their hats or on their own outfits. So, 1930s, you have women, you have children from 7 to 12 years old. And these children, were not the children of the cangaceiros. Cangaceiros would not bring along with them, carrying on their laps their babies. After the baby was born, they would give the baby to someone that would be trustworthy. So, for instance, Silvio Bulhões, the man that I talked to on the phone, the son of Corisco, one of the sons of Corisco, that became an economist and a politician, local politician, later on. He was given to a priest, and this priest raised him. So many years afterwards, he got to know that he was the son of Corisco. He never met Corisco. And many of these children that were born in those very difficult conditions were given either to ranchers, to farmers, or to politicians, or to priests, to people that could raise them in a normal situation, normal environment. They have dogs too. So you see, it's, yeah. So in a way, cangaço, it's almost a reproduction in a way, in a parallel reality of the world of the sertão, of the hinterland, in which you have a community that has men, women, children, pets, at the same time as a military organization, and they would call themselves captains, and well, I mean, we could go on talking about that for a long time. And also a way of life, a profession, because the low-rank Cangaceiros would look up to their leaders as their bosses, and they would call them their bosses. So the Cangaceiros leaders, in fact, behaved in many ways as the coronéis, as the landowners, as the people who had employees, in quote unquote, I mean, men that were under their command. So it was a very interesting and different social organization parallel to the official world of that time. John Means is telling me that my time is over, but I thank you very much for having the patience to hear my talk here, with my speech here, and thank you very much.